Thank you for joining us for Patient Conversations with Leah, a place where patients and caregivers can talk with me about the real, relevant, and yes, even the raw aspects of their lung cancer journey. Because we want to know and understand these perspectives firsthand from those who are the true experts on what life is like for a young adult diagnosed with lung cancer.
Hello, and welcome back to part 2 with Heather on Patient Conversations with Leah. In our first conversation with Heather, we talked about her general diagnosis. She was diagnosed at age 36 with stage 4 ALK-positive lung cancer. And it was in June of 2020, right in the heart of the pandemic. So that definitely played a part in her diagnosis journey. So if you haven't seen part 1, I definitely encourage you to watch it because it is shocking, some of the things that went on. In part 2, we're going to focus more on kind of how a stage 4 diagnosis at a young age affects your personal life. And in our Facebook community support group for patients, a lot of conversation revolves around dating in your young adulthood with a cancer diagnosis. So Heather, if you have the desire to share with us kind of where were you in your personal life dating wise when you were diagnosed? Where are you now? How did you get where you are now? And kind of just let us know a little bit of that part of your journey as well.
Sure. So actually, at the time of my diagnosis, I was engaged. I had been in a relationship for 15 years. Um, and he was supportive. He was very supportive whenever I was first diagnosed and throughout the first year. But about a year into my diagnosis, we actually separated. And so that was pretty devastating. It was pretty sudden on my end. And not completely unexpected, but just very sudden and shocking for me. And of course, just devastating after being with somebody for so long and now having this diagnosis. I just kind of felt like, who is going to want to date me now after a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis? So it was tough at first. And, I knew I wanted to go ahead and give it a shot. Like I wanted to try to get back out there and date, even if it's just going to be for short term fun flings or whatever. If nobody wanted to be serious with somebody at stage 4, because that was how I felt. Like I just didn't know how people are going to take this. So um, I decided to get on the dating apps. And so then the question comes into, when do you share that information? Do you put it on your I don't know, what is it, like your profile, I guess? Yeah, your profile. Do you put it on your profile? Do you just be right out front with it, like, hey, I've got stage 4 lung cancer? Or is it something you hold on to until you feel like the time is right? So for me, that's kind of what I went with at first. It wasn't that I was trying to hide anything, but I didn't feel like that's all of me. So I don't feel like that was something I had to advertise right off the bat. So I decided personally, I'm not going to put it on my profile. Um, but that I would share it with a person whenever I felt like the time was right or if it came up. And so in my experience, in getting back out there and dating, things just happen naturally and fluidly, just like they would for anybody who has no cancer. Um, and then I remember the first time I did share it with one of the people I was chatting with, it just came up naturally. I don't remember. I think they were sharing something that happened with one of their family members who had cancer. And I was kind of like, speaking about cancer, I have cancer, so it was kind of awkward at first, kind of navigating how to discuss that with people. But I've always been very open and upfront about my diagnosis because I feel like the more I share, the more it helps me, the more it can help others around me. And I never had anybody really have at least an upfront negative response whenever I've shared with them. Everybody's always been very kind and supportive whenever I've shared it with them. And what I found actually, because I have been so outspoken, I guess, with my cancer diagnosis and sharing, especially on social media and things like that, what I actually found was a lot of people who I did end up sharing it with came out after the fact and shared with me that they actually already knew because they Googled me. They searched me. And so they would see like posts and things that I had shared in the past about my diagnosis and about my lung cancer journey. And so I always thought that that was kind of funny, I guess, that people actually already knew before I shared it with them, and that they were waiting for me to share it with them. And so that actually felt really good to know, like, okay, like people are open to this and I can still get out there and date, and it's not going to just be um, me on my own, So, I dated a few people and chatted, and, things weren't really serious with very many of them. But finally, I met a guy, and he was very supportive from the very beginning. He's also one who I didn't share it right away, but he came out after the facts and told me, like, hey, I actually searched you, and I knew that already about you. Um, but now we have been together for 2 years. This past January actually is 2 years, and we're going strong. So um, I don't want people to feel like, you can't get out there. It's possible. And there are going to be people who are open and supportive about it. And if they're not, then they're not the right one. So move on.
That's awesome. Like, dating is tricky anyways, whether you're
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I
cancer,
mean, there's a lot of things trying to navigate, like having been in a relationship for 15 years,
right?
I hadn't had a date in so long, like I never even had to think about that. So there was a lot of things like, oh my gosh, like, and getting back into the dating world and all these new terms that I'm like, what are all these things even mean? So there's a lot of tricky factors that I had to navigate. But
Yes.
obviously the lung cancer one was the one that I was the most concerned about. Like, again, I think the biggest part was just knowing when to share it. And I think for everybody, that's going to be different, what you're comfortable
Yeah,
with.
I could see that. I think it's interesting too, like human nature now that we have social media and, Google and all the things, it's very rare that people don't, oh, I'm just going to see who this person is online, kind of
Yeah, see
thing.
what you can
So,
find.
yeah. So I guess it's interesting to me that many of them said they already knew, but they were waiting for you to tell them, which
Yeah,
is kind of a breath of fresh air, really, because you hear all the horror stories of dating and how terrible it is, and this, that, and the other. And of course, there is that. But to know that there are people that are willing to not let your diagnosis define who you are, um, is pretty amazing. So,
absolutely.
yay.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it too is, as I am getting into like the more serious relationship, do they really understand? Like, I look healthy, and I think obviously to anybody on the street, like they would never know. Um, and so as you're developing this relationship, like you don't want them to look at you like as a someone who's terminally ill, let's say, um, and struggling to do the day-to-day life. But at the same time, you want them to have some kind of understanding of, I am on active treatment and it does affect me or cause me some side effects. And I am not the person who I used to be, which of course you're just dating them. They don't know who you were before.
Right.
But so, there are some complexities there. Like like I tolerate my treatment very well, but my biggest side effect is it makes me tired. I'm tired a lot. And so with the guy I'm with now, like he's been so understanding about that from the very beginning and very supportive about it. But at the same time, he's very hopeful, optimistic, and positive. And he's just been there for me. Like he's been there with me whenever I've been upset. Like he's been there for me whenever I'm happy. So um it's been good. It's been good.
That makes me so happy for you. I
Thank you.
mean, this is a hard pill to swallow when you're diagnosed with something like that, and or like this, and to worry that you're going to be alone. Nobody wants to be alone. I think, it's human nature to want a partner. And um, I think you're going to be an inspiration to people who are watching, that you can find someone to date and to date seriously, even with this type of diagnosis, because it's hard enough without a diagnosis. And
Absolutely.
and I do like
Yeah.
your point of like, do they really understand? Because that is tricky when people look at
Yeah.
us and think, oh, they would never know.
It's
You could put it
fine.
in the lineup and say, pick the person with cancer, and they would never look at us and see, oh,
Yeah.
it's them. And understanding kind of really what we're dealing with. And kudos to the person you're dating too, because I think that just shows the maturity and the openness and really acceptance of a different maybe way of life. Like you said, you're tired, or if you have skin side effects, or all the things, what a keeper, maybe.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
What a keeper.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's just fascinating to me that for all the bad rap that dating gets and dating apps get and all this is just, they need to put you on their commercial, whichever app you met him. Like, this
Well,
is
well, I didn't find him right away. I had to go through a few
yeah,
a
got
few
to kiss a
people
few
that
frogs
didn't work
first.
out great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But again, with those, they did not work out because of the cancer. It was anything that anybody would have experienced, it. So that's another thing to be like optimistic about, is even though, yes, this is such a big thing in our life that we think about every single day, you can still find happiness. It's not going to control everything. Yeah, you can find people out there that are open to it. So just give yourself that opportunity.
Yes, I love it. I'm so glad we talked about this because, I've been married for over 20 years. So that's not been a part of my journey because we were already established and, whatnot. So I think this is just a great thing to share with people. I guess before I wrap up, any last like piece of advice to people who are thinking about getting out there to dating? Is there a particular way to go about it? Any little advice you might have for them?
Again, I think it's kind of a personal preference on how soon you want to share the information, but I guess my advice is you're more than your cancer. So don't, even though it is such a big part of our life and it weighs so heavy on us, like think outside of that. Like when you're trying to get back into it, don't even think about it if you can, like the things that are important to you, the things that you're looking for in a mate, like the things that make you happy, you focus on that and find the person who's right for you. Don't settle just because somebody is accepting of it. Um, yeah, like just try to make it not revolved around your cancer. It'll come up. You'll share it when you're ready. They'll either accept it or they won't. And yeah, just give yourself the shot and try to make it not about that, so that way you really fully give yourself a chance for happiness.
I think that's great advice. I love the part, like, don't settle just because they're willing to accept the cancer. Because I could see how that would be something you could fall into. Like, oh, I found this person. They don't seem concerned that, they're concerned, but it's not influencing them to stay in a relationship or not because I have cancer, and just being like, okay, well, they're accepting of this. They're willing to take this on in their life. This is good. So
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. Well, again, thank you so much today for being here. I think it's great. Like I said, this is a multi-part series. Our next series, or part of the series, I want to kind of dive into, we've talked about like your diagnosis and your dating life, but I'd love to hear kind of how this has affected your family and the people that care for you. So with that being said, hopefully the rest of our viewers will make sure to follow us to the next conversation. So thank you so much for being here today, because I think it's been enlightening. I think this topic is hot for a lot of people.
Hope it helps.
Yes.